I will show you another animal, which is also an amphibian, and it is called a salamander. And a salamander resembles a lizard, but it's an amphibian, and you'll see immediately what I'm talking about. Notice I always carry these animals that are amphibious in containers that have water in them, because we don't want them to dry up. This is a common tiger salamander, native to the usually higher elevations in Utah, wooded areas where there's more moisture. And unfortunately, for it, the young in their larval stage, when they have gills and just live under the water, are quite popular as fish bait. And people cruelly catch these in nets and they sell them to fish bait supplies, and people hook them through the nose there and drag them around in the lakes and hope they catch a fish. This one happened to be a rescued individual from such a fish bait situation. It was never used for fish bait. When we first got it, it had gills and had to have the cage, or aquarium as we call it, about half full of water because it breathed through the water. But once they reach the adult stage and lose the gills, then they don't need that much water. It just needs enough to stay moist. And this little guy has at least doubled in size. He also is very fond of cockroaches. If you look and see how fat he is, if he discovers one of these cockroaches, he's probably going to eat it right up. Let's be quiet for a minute and see. Uh-oh. See how he snaps at it? These will also live in your yard if you keep the yard moist and cool enough. So you can see why the little amphibians are really good neighbors to have. They get rid of all these icky bugs. To them, that's just like a Big Mac. You wouldn't eat it, neither would I, but maybe Steve McQueen would in the movie if you saw Papillon. He got so hungry in prison he ate a cockroach. But another myth about the cockroaches is that they're dirty and carry disease. Actually, of all the insects, the cockroach is one of the cleaner animals, and they're actually quite good food to feed your pets, provided that they'll eat them. And that's because the cockroach cleans itself constantly. And if it gets dropped into the sand, it's very uncomfortable until it gets all that sand off of its body. A good way to get rid of cockroaches naturally without having to poison them is to add some diatomaceous earth to your garden. Diatomaceous earth is that material that they used to put in swimming pool filters, and it would collect certain bacteria and debris and help filter the water and keep it clean. Well, it's made of little sharp particles that cockroaches and other animals get in between the plates of their scales, and it punctures them, and they actually bleed to death. Even if they're suffering from that, a predator such as a salamander or a toad can still eat them. It doesn't do that animal any harm. But there's a natural way to control these without resorting to sprays. One of the fears that we have in ecology is if you keep spraying and spraying, eventually the bugs build up an immunity and the spray doesn't affect them, but it does kill other things that we like, possibly would affect the salamander or toad. And then we don't have toads to eat them, and we don't have spray that works. So those are something to be conscious about when you're making a garden. Another thing is you can put traps out for cockroaches. If you put a little piece of bread with some peanut butter in a masonry jar and tip it up against a wall, or you put some decaying fruit in there, they just love that, and they'll come and sniff the edge of the jar and fall in. You can catch 20 or 30 of them in a jar per night and just flush them down the toilet, and you don't ever have to touch them, and you don't have to see them dead laying around, and you're not poisoning anything else. So that's about all I have on the amphibians, but notice again that the salamander, even though it is kind of lizard-like, has a very smooth skin. Let's see if I can zoom up on that guy just a little bit, and see if you can appreciate just how smooth the skin is. Some of these will get a brilliant black and yellow or orangish color. This is kind of olive green, but behind its cheeks there, at the base of its head, there are no more gills. This is an adult, and it doesn't need the water to breathe. It just needs some water to keep moist. Okay, so I'm going to take this away. And I want to show you what the horned lizards eat. What I have in this jar is a bunch of good old red ants. Now, don't get alarmed. These ants are really harmless. They are not fire ants. We don't have fire ants in Utah yet. The fire ants come from the genus Sal-ants, and they're only about a quarter this size. These little ants are your typical red harvester ant, and they're very popular with the horned lizards. They eat quite a bit of these. This particular ant here is a Pogonomyrmex, either Maricopa, Californicus, or Occidentalis. Those are the three most common species we have. But as long as you don't take them right out of the nest this way, you can actually let them crawl on you. They don't bite, they don't sting. If you get into their nest and agitate them, they have a very powerful sting. And one of these days we'll draw a picture of an ant on the blackboard and explain all about it. As you can see, I don't have any reluctance to let these crawl on me. You can't even feel them, as a matter of fact. These ants dedicate themselves to collecting seeds. They're not the typical ants that get into your picnic lunch and you know, look for something sweet, although they are attracted to decaying fruit and things like bread. That's not what they're out looking for. They're much happier with some good old grass seed or seeds from a desert bush. All ants are females, with the exception of the winged ants, which you only see in the spring or summertime. And then about half of those are drones and the other half are queens, and the winged ants we refer to as alates. In the harvester ant group, particularly the Pogonomyrmex genus, all the ants progress through a series of tasks in the course of their life. They'll only live a few months. They don't have a true caste system as with other species of ants, which some may only be soldier ants, like the Solenopsis or fire ants. There'll be some of those that are called majors, and those are bigger ants with big heads, and those are your soldier ants. These, when they're younger, they tend to stay down deep in the hole and feed the queen and take care of the young. As they get a little older, they start doing tunneling work, and as they're older still, they finally emerge from the nest, and they act as sentries around the outer part of the entrance to the nest and also become midden workers. They move the garbage around, the dead ants and the piles of dirt that the other ants drop near the entrance. They move it around so that the nest takes a shape. And then when they get close to the age where they're going to die anyway, then they start going out foraging. That means out gathering food. And you'll see long trails of them if they're black ants, almost like a highway out looking for seeds. The red ants tend to fan out a little bit more and disperse, and but they love seeds. So you don't need to worry about these. I must tell you though, of all the ants in the desert, if you get stung by one of these, you'll never forget it, because the red ant has the nastiest sting, particularly the Californicus. And you have to look under a microscope really to see what they are. But the sting will feel just like somebody stuck a needle in your finger or held a match onto your skin for a few seconds, and then it'll start to ache, and that will continue for the better part of a day It'll swell up, not quite as bad as a bee sting usually, but it'll ache and hurt for several days, and then it will itch for a week to 10 days afterwards. And it just drives you crazy. It's like 10 mosquito bites. What makes the ants sting you is when you start smashing them and irritating, they let off a gas, and that gas is what tells all the ants that they're under attack, and they retaliate. If you leave the ants alone, they leave you alone. So I'll tell you more about ants another time. I just thought you'd like to, let's see what we can use from this footage here. This is what the horned lizards eat. And they're afraid of the ants too. They only like to see a few at a time. If you get too many ants in their cage, they panic just like anybody would if they found them on their sandwich. Okay, that's about it for today. You can stop.